Joining us now is Sarah Reese-Jones, managing editor and columnist at PoliticusUSA, and Ash Wright, senior advisor to George P. Bush and Republican strategist. And Ash, first of all, do you think it is a wise idea for Republicans to make the genesis of the Mueller report somehow part of the 2020 campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the president has, by all accounts, been cleared of any collusion with Russia. At this point, I think there's been so much over the last 2 years of false accusations to him. He has to actually clear his name, and I do think that the American people want to believe the truth, and we need a president that didn't collude with Russia. And so I think polling-wise, it makes a lot of sense for him. I think it's going to be a great talking point for him on the campaign trail, and I think his advisors are correct to advise him to use this as a major 2020 talking point.
And Sarah, even though there were dozens of communications between Trump campaign top officials, including Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen and Jared Kushner and on, who had contacts with the Russians and spoke with them, shouldn't Democrats say, okay, look, there's nothing wrong with having contacts with the foreign adversary, and here we have a special counsel who determined that the evidence did not rise to the level of a criminal conspiracy?
Well, actually, the president was not exonerated. He's been on this victory tour, but that is not actually what the report said. Even the summary that Barr gave to us, we have not seen the report, actually, and they're going to let Trump edit the report. And I think the question that all Americans have is, if they are hiding nothing, then why can't we see the unedited report? So I think that there is a looming question of, did the president illegally obstruct justice? And that is why, historically, the precedent has been that this report would be sent unedited to the House Judiciary Committee, and they would determine if there were evidence to go forward and see if they need to prosecute these charges of possible obstruction of justice. So the president is saying he's been exonerated. That's not even what the report that Barr gave us said. And of course, Barr was sort of handpicked by Donald Trump to be his attorney general after he wrote a letter saying that he thought the Mueller report wasn't a very nice thing and he didn't really agree with it. So I'm not sure, if I were the Trump campaign, would I be running on that? Maybe, because their base might fall for it, but I don't think there are many independents and even Trump supporters. I live in a Trump area that think that he has betrayed his country because he hasn't defended the country from this attack on our elections.
Well, Ash, to Sarah's point, I mean, the Mueller report did conclude there is evidence on obstruction of justice that, quote, does not exonerate President Trump. Why does the president, after being given good news that this is essentially over, why does he feel the need to lie about a part of this report?
Well, to clarify, it says that he isn't exonerated, but it also says that there's no evidence to find him guilty of it either. And so essentially is what he's saying is, I can't find evidence one way or the other. I do agree with my counterpart.
Just to be clear, it's not that there's no evidence, it's that the evidence is not sufficient, at least according to what William Barr said. But Mueller did not make a call on this. I mean, Mueller essentially wanted to punt and have Congress decide.
Correct, but he has to give that over to Andy Barr, to the Attorney General. It is his job as the Attorney General to make the call on that. There's precedence on that. I think he's right. I do agree with my counterpart that the full report in its full capacity should be available for the public. It should be sent over to the House Judiciary Committee. I think the problem here that we have is that there's very little trust with the House Judiciary Committee and with Democrats, because they spent the last 22 months accusing Republicans and the Trump campaign of colluding with Russia, and there is no evidence of that. And now we're asking them to come back and say, hey, trust us and give us all the trust again. And there's just not any level that, frankly, most Americans, or at least the White House, have in the House Judiciary Committee. Their job is to make rulings, not to run opposition reports on political parties of their opposition. And that's kind of where we're at. And I think that's where the American people see where it's at. And that's the fear of the White House, is they just see this as a constant opposition report against Donald Trump.
Sarah, how about it? I mean, the Democrats did complain when the Republicans were chasing the Obama administration in those Benghazi hearings for several years. The Democrats said that that was inappropriate. So why would it be appropriate now for the Democrats to go after President Trump based on the Mueller report?
That's a great question, but I do think that we're talking about two separate things here. We're talking about our national security and our election safety, and one of the big concerns that people have is, why, if Donald Trump is taking this summary of this report to be accurate, why hasn't he then taken steps to protect the country, to protect our next election from the attack from Russia, which this report did confirm happened, which all of the U.S. intelligence entire community has told Trump that this happened, and he has denied that this has happened, and he's believed Putin over his own intelligence community. So I think that you have a lot going on here that needs to be answered, but the number one thing we have to have answered is, why can't we have our elections protected? Why hasn't the president taken action on that?
Ash, why don't you answer that question? Why hasn't the Trump administration to try to do more to protect the elections?
Well, primarily because the elections already are protected. I mean, look, Facebook is a privately owned company. We know that Russia ran ads there. The government cannot step into Facebook and direct them on who can and can't run ads. That's up to a private company. The DNC got hacked, but they are run and owned privately. The government has no play inside the DNC. And so it's up to private companies to protect them, or it would be up to Congress and Senate to create election laws that say Facebook or Twitter or whoever you run social media ads can no longer run ads from foreign countries. And I think they have actually taken some steps there. So now if you want to run a political ad on Facebook, you have to go through several steps. You have to prove your identity. You have to submit your driver's license, etc. It's a very long, grueling process, and so there have been steps that way. But it's not up to the president or to the White House to secure our elections.
Well, I mean, look, the Mueller report did find, Ash, that in fact the Russians did make several contacts with the Trump campaign, and they were not reciprocated to the level that would rise to the level of a conspiracy. But Sarah, to Ash's point, I mean, don't the campaigns have the responsibility first and foremost that if there are contacts from a foreign adversary, it's their responsibility to say, go to the FBI, or to say, make sure there's not any sort of conspiracy that they unwittingly enter into?
Right. You wonder why these people in the Trump campaign did not do that. They didn't take those actions, and they did lie about those contacts. And so I think there's a lot of smoke around that. And I think that people will feel better when they can see the full report, unedited by the president. I'm unclear why anyone would give the report to him to edit, as Senator Lindsey Graham suggested. But to the point about the elections, I think that there are many things, actually, that the White House and the president could do. Certainly we saw President Obama take action against the Russians with harsh sanctions, and he sent home a bunch of diplomats from the country. So he made clear, this isn't going to be tolerated. Then we had, very difficult for Trump, Congress had to, because Trump would not do it, they had to, with a veto-proof majorities, pass these sanctions against Russia. And even when Trump was agreeing to sign that, he was kind of begrudging about it, and then he said he didn't really want to do that. So it makes people wonder, why can't you take these harsher actions against Russia?
Right. Sarah Reese-Jones and Ash Wright, thank you both for coming on. We appreciate it. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Coming
having
up,
me.
NASA has canceled what would have been a